I never thought I would find myself entangled in a web of temptation and contradictory feelings during a normal business trip. I was 38 years old and juggling a hard job as a financial consultant in Toronto with a marriage that had seen better days. After 10 years of marriage, my husband David and I still had a strong affection for one another, but the spark that had once characterized our relationship had progressively waned into a routine that was cozy but uninspired. I had to travel frequently for work, which frequently made me feel cut off from my personal life. To keep a semblance of contact with David, I would spend days in immaculate hotel rooms, hopping from one appointment to the next and only making quick calls home. I met Paul, a new client whose arrival would upset the delicate balance I had established in my life during one of these journeys to Montreal. Paul, who was in his early 40s, was the CEO of a tech business that was expanding quickly and had just raised a sizable sum of money. Because of his ambition, wit, and charismatic confidence, it was simple to understand why he had achieved such success. I was immediately impressed by his charisma and command of the room when we first met. It was difficult to ignore the enthusiasm he exuded, and I found myself anticipating our encounters more than I ought to have. Paul proposed that we carry on the conversation over dinner during one of these meetings. He smiled charmingly and continued, "I feel like we're just getting started, but we have a lot to discuss. Let's have some food and continue our conversation." Knowing that our professional boundaries were beginning to blur, I hesitated for a second. However, I explained it away as just another business meal, which happens frequently enough in my profession. "Yes, why not?" I grinned back and agreed. "Let's get it done." We eventually found ourselves at a classy French bistro close to my hotel, where the wine flowed freely and the lighting was low. I experienced the well-known rush of adrenaline that comes with sealing a huge deal as we took our seats. However, there was more tonight, a glimmer of enthusiasm unrelated to work. Paul was a pleasure to speak with, and as the evening went on, the subject of work gave way to more intimate subjects. We exchanged tales about our families, discussed our favorite places to visit, and even chuckled over the peculiarities of our different fields. Instead of dining with a client, it felt natural and at ease, like catching up with an old friend. But as the evening went on, I couldn't help but notice the small changes in Paul's behavior, the way his eyes lingered on me for a bit too long, the way his praises veered into more intimate than professional areas. He once said, "You're really something, Emma," as he attentively swirled his wine. "You're driven, intelligent, and don't put up with bullshit." It is revitalizing. I tried to dismiss the compliment with a laugh. "Paul, thank you. This industry has required me to be tough. It isn't always simple." He leaned in a little and said, "I bet. But you do it so elegantly. It's amazing." We were silent for a moment, and there was tension in the air between us that was not expressed. The wine and the warmth of the evening had softened my determination, even though I knew I should refocus the talk on more secure topics. I discovered that, for the first time in a long time, I was enjoying the attention, the sense of being seen, and the appreciation. Paul proposed that we have a nightcap at my hotel's bar as the dinner was coming to an end. He urged, his smile charming, "Just one more drink. I'm not quite ready for the night to end, and it's early." The sensible side of my brain told me to go to bed, but I hesitated. But I gave in against my better judgment because it was difficult to resist the temptation of his companionship. I tried to sound informal as I said, "Okay, one more drink." But only one. We headed to the hotel bar, a modern, darkly lighted area that was largely deserted at this hour. After locating a peaceful nook, we placed our drink orders and carried on our talk. However, the mood was different this time, feeling more intense and intimate. Paul's intense presence drew me in, and I could feel his eyes on me. His voice was low and solemn as he abruptly remarked, "Emma, can I be honest with you?" With a twinge of anxiety, I answered, "Of course." He seemed to be picking his words carefully as he paused. "I've had a great time getting to know you. More than I anticipated. And I get the unshakable feeling that something is happening here, between us." A mixture of surprise and a hint of something deeper, something I didn't want to admit, caused my breath to catch in my throat. "Paul, we just met," I responded, attempting to minimize the conflict. Additionally, we are collaborating. It's a complicated situation. He continued, his eyes unblinking. I know. Furthermore, I'm not attempting to complicate matters. However, I've come to realize that life is too brief to disregard your emotions. And I'm attracted to you right now, Emma. His implication-laden remarks lingered in the atmosphere. I was aware that I was married, that David should be my devoted partner, and that this was a line I should not cross. In actuality, though, I couldn't recall the last time I had experienced this kind of connection, this feeling of being genuinely noticed and wanted. I reminded Paul that I was married, but my voice lacked conviction. I am unable to. We are unable to accomplish this. His face was genuine as he nodded. I honor that. Furthermore, I'm not asking you to do anything that you don't feel comfortable doing. But I had to express my feelings to you. Even if it doesn't work out. Something inside of me wanted to wake up and go, to put an end to the evening before things got any worse. However, I stayed, torn between the allure of the moment and my obligations. I was aware that I needed to bid goodnight, withdraw to the security of my hotel room, and stop giving in to the increasing temptation. I didn't pull away, though, as Paul reached across the table and took my hand gently. His fingers barely brushed my knuckles as he whispered, Emma. I don't want to make things more difficult for you. However, I also don't want to pass up something that has a genuine feel to it. As I gazed at him, my mind was whirling with contradicting ideas. Although I was married and had a deep affection for David, my bond with Paul was undeniable. It was exhilarating, euphoric, and completely incorrect. However, my desire to stay grew stronger the more I attempted to persuade myself to leave. Paul, I started, but as the situation weighed heavily on me, my voice faltered. His eyes never left mine as he gave my hand a light squeeze. He said, You don't have to make any decisions tonight. However, if you need someone who can relate to you or if you ever want to discuss, I'm present. With a mixture of remorse and relief, I nodded. I withdrew my hand and whispered, Thank you. But I think I should go to bed now. Paul respected my choice and nodded. Obviously. I was not trying to push. I apologize if I went too far. It's all right, I said as I got up and gathered my belongings. Thank you for being honest. I simply need some time to reflect. There was a glimmer of disappointment in his eyes as he smiled. Emma, take as much time as you require. I will not be leaving. After saying our goodbyes, I returned to my hotel room with a flurry of emotions racing through my head. Even though I knew that leaving was the proper decision, the interaction with Paul had triggered an emotion in me that I found difficult to ignore. I slept through the remainder of the night, repeating our chat and wondering how my marriage to David was going. The next day, I made an effort to divert my attention from my work by cramming myself into meetings and emails. However, I found myself hoping for a message from Paul each time I checked my phone. The pull remained, a persistent voice in the back of my mind, even though I knew it was stupid. Paul texted me that night as I was getting ready to leave for Toronto. Emma, hello. I hope all is well with you. I apologize if I caused awkwardness. I'm available if you want to talk. My heart was pounding as I gazed at the letter. It was difficult to resist the impulse to reach out, even though I knew that doing so would only make everything more complicated. Before I could second-guess myself, I typed a brief response. Regards, Paul. I'm all right. I'm just thinking about a lot. Have a safe trip. He answered in a flash. You as well. And you know where to find me if you ever need a friend. I couldn't get rid of the impression that I was at a crossroads when I boarded my journey home. On the one hand, there was my marriage to David, which was based on years of stability, comfort, and shared experiences. However, there was also the indisputable spark I had with Paul, a bond that caused me to reevaluate all of my self-perceptions. David was waiting for me at the airport when I returned to Toronto, his warm embrace and well-known smile providing much-needed solace. But even as I gave him a hug, I couldn't deny the persistent unhappiness that had taken hold of my thoughts. In reality, I felt more alive during those few moments with Paul than I had in a long time, despite my desire to be content and happy in my marriage. I tried to concentrate on my marriage throughout the course of the following few weeks, trying to get back in touch with David and reignite the spark that had waned over the years. We booked weekend trips, went on dates, and made an effort to talk more honestly. But despite my best efforts, I was unable to get rid of the thoughts of Paul and the possibility of what may have been. Paul then sent me another message one evening while I was working late at the workplace. "You've been on my mind, Emma. I can't help it, even though I know it's difficult. Even if we are only friends, I would really like to see you again. There is no pressure." My heart was racing as I gazed at the message. I was aware that seeing Paul again would cause things to become even more hazy and might perhaps endanger my marriage. But I couldn't force myself to ignore the draw, which was still there and stronger than before. We could go out for coffee sometime, merely to catch up. In order to discuss without the constraints of a formal business setting, we decided to meet at a calm cafe. Paul was there as I entered, his face displaying a mixture of uncertainty and hope. He smiled warmly at me, and as I sat down across from him, I experienced a familiar flutter in my chest. With a nonchalant tone and piercing eyes, he said, "Thanks for meeting me. I didn't think you would want to." I said in a quiet voice, "It's good to see you. A lot of things have been on my mind." We tried to keep the conversation light and cordial for the next hour. However, the underlying tension was unavoidable, and I could tell we were getting closer to the subject we had been avoiding as the cafe started to empty out. Paul said abruptly and solemnly, "Emma, I won't act as though I don't still have feelings for you. But I don't want to make things more difficult for you, and I respect your boundaries." My thoughts were racing as I stared at him. I was feeling a jumbled mess of emotions, even though I had come here to find clarity. Although I wanted to act morally and preserve my integrity and marriage, there was no denying my relationship with Paul. "Paul, I'm at a loss for what to do," I admitted, my voice shaking. "I love David and I'm married, but I can't deny how I feel in your presence." His fingers lightly touched mine as he reached across the table. He said, "You don't have to know all the answers just yet. But regardless of what you decide, know that I'm here." As we sat there, we felt the pressure of our decisions. I was aware that there would be difficulties along the way and that there would be no simple solutions. However, as I observed Paul, I came to the realization that sometimes the choices that get us to where we need to go are the most challenging. I felt a feeling of closure as we said our goodbyes, a silent knowledge that I would face whatever came next with bravery and honesty. I realized I couldn't stay in limbo any longer, whether it meant recommitting to my marriage or pursuing a relationship with Paul. And I experienced a slight but hopeful sensation of calm as I left the cafe. I'd work things out one step at a time.